We continue along here on a Monday edition of Glenn Clark Radio. The Orioles indeed lose 2 out of 3 to the Rangers last week. They're 4 games under 500 again. They're 2 games out of the second wild card spot. We haven't chatted with this man since the Orioles trade deadline, so we'll get his thoughts on where they find themselves now on the other side. You know him from 105.7 The Fan. You know him from the League of Dreams and his podcast as well. He is Orioles Hall of Famer Mike Bordick, and he's back with us now here on GCR. Bordy, it's Glenn. Bordy, aren't we all just having a great time watching Orioles baseball? What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Glenn. I'm good, man. I'm all right. Thanks for mentioning the League of Dreams and the podcast and stuff like that. But yeah, it's tough, man. What a tough year to be an Oriole fan. The ups and downs, the inconsistencies, the signs of brilliance, right? Like, oh my gosh, look how good these guys can be. And then on the other hand, oh my gosh, how bad can these guys get? So just the roller coaster ride, and we'll see how they finish up. But I don't know. It seems like all season long we've been talking about them right there in the wild card hunt, and it might take them a little run or two to get there. But we'll see what happens here down the stretch.
Mike, I want to talk to you about a bunch of stuff. I'm going to start with because I know you guys had Buster on the Be More Baseball podcast, and then Buster, he's typically hard on the Orioles. He doesn't hide it much, but I'm torn about this because I think we're all frustrated about where the Orioles are. And I think rightfully so we're frustrated about where the Orioles are on the whole. The trade deadline itself, I don't know. I don't know how mad I am. I'm mad that the Orioles got to this point with Adley Rutschman, but he was going to be a free agent next year, and we don't know if there's going to be a next year, and they're not very good, and he hasn't been good really since mid-May, and yet they still were able to get a really good return for him. It's hard for me to be very worked up about that decision or that trade. While I acknowledge that I'm frustrated about where the Orioles are on the whole.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think that is kind of the sentiment. And we don't want to be stagnant and all of a sudden be losing. I think part of this whole process is the understanding that, the Orioles have to have foresight, because if they're not going to be, a top payroll team, they're going to have to do just this: trade guys maybe a little bit earlier than the fans, had hoped. But the fact that he was part of the rebuild, he was the rebuild, the face of the rebuild. The fact that, the Orioles had to lose for 4 years and the Orioles fans were so patient. They put all the stock into Adley Rutschman as the foundational piece, and that's where the frustration sets in. Now, this haul that he got back, I think it's pretty darn good, and I think the fact that all of a sudden they've been pitcher centric now, it seems like maybe last year in some trades, and now into this year, with the draft and everything, I think they're setting up better on that front, because they completely missed for 8 years on any pitching. They hadn't developed any pitching. And even the pitchers that they finally did develop were undrafted guys, but so we'll see what happens here with this group of young prospects. That's the thing. It seems like for the last couple years coming into every year, there's just a lot of hope, there isn't a lot of proven, and we're kind of going to be there again. Let's hope the young guys hit, man, because that's what it's going to take. And if they don't, then it's just going to be a tough road for a while.
Mike Elias says this is not another rebuild. That and that's measured against the fact that he's acquiring more prospects. But obviously, you can turn around and trade prospects for major league pieces if there is a season next year. I guess it's a twofold question to me. One, do you trust that it's not another rebuild, that the Orioles do intend to be aggressive in fixing their many problems moving forward? And then two, do you feel like Mike Elias has earned the benefit of the doubt and the right that he should be still the one making decisions moving forward?
I don't know, man. It's so tough. And listen, man, I know that the landscape is just forever changing, and especially with the Orioles, everything that Elias's tenure has really gone through with COVID. It's been a challenge. Moving the field all around, first the fences back and then bring back in, all that kind of stuff too. I don't know. I feel like the organization is where it should have been after, 4 years ago, as far as the strength, as far as the pitching, maybe some young prospects. So, that said, I feel like it's set up in a pretty good situation with Bradish and Boz signed up. You got the Polar Bear, signed up for a while. Basayo signed up. So there are some pieces. There aren't a lot of mysteries. I think there's a pretty good foundation. And with the hope of pitching, because pitching is always going to be the key, because nobody's figured out really how to keep pitchers healthy. So you better have a lot of really good young pitching, and I think the Orioles are kind of in that position right now. And then they might be able to go out and test the free agent market. But all this is said with, can we look past what's just transpired over the last 8 years and say, okay, let's give them another try? You know what I mean? The one thing that I will say that I personally feel like was missing was just the overall development, and I guess part of that is just the fact that guys nowadays, just the way the game is, they don't mind rushing guys up to the big leagues, and they just feel like they can develop up there. And we've seen that it doesn't really happen like that. It's just a lot of inconsistencies. Even if a guy does have a flash where he's rookie of the year, just the foundational structure of these players is just, it hasn't been solidified, so there are going to be all these inconsistencies with young guys and no true foundation. So I hope the development process changes, and I don't know how that will happen. I think in large part, just the whole idea of trying to understand the modern athlete, I think they lost a little bit of what Major League Baseball, the prerequisite of Major League Baseball is, and we've all seen that, the lack of defense, the lack of proper base running, the lack of, let's just say, overall baseball IQ. So I think if an organization, and like the Orioles, is set up because they can truly separate themselves, I think all these teams talk about winning on the margins. Well, the true margin this year is if you can catch the ball and run the bases better, you're going to be a better team. So I would think that they would look at it like that and say, we need that type of development, that type of focus on these guys, because they're all incredible athletes and they're all going to get their bat speed up just from all the technology they have now. But don't forget about what Major League Baseball is supposed to be about, and that's the best guys catching the ball, the best guys throwing the ball and hitting. So right now, I think we're overpaying for minor league baseball, to be honest with you, just because of so many injuries, to be honest with you.
That's about right. Mike Bordick with us here on GCR. Mike, we've talked so much this season about Gunnar. I think all of us were hoping that last Friday night against the Phillies, that huge clutch, would prove to be game-winning triple would be the moment for him. That's obviously not been the case. He had all of one hit, although I acknowledge 7 walks last week. I was asked a question over the weekend that, I don't know how to answer, which is, we all keep saying that we hope that one day he just wakes up and he's Gunnar Henderson again, but at what point do you have too much evidence and do you say maybe he's not what we thought he was? What is the line between, hey, there's still Gunnar Henderson in there versus maybe the guy that we saw for 2024 was an anomaly and he's just not that player? I don't know.
Yeah, it's really hard, I guess, to put your finger on this. And I will say this: I think Gunnar's abilities shine through. Whenever he gets on base, he creates havoc. The other team, they hate it. He goes first to third all the time. He's a base stealing threat, even though he hasn't probably stole as much as he has in the past. He's a power threat at the plate. He's had more home runs than he hit last year. I think that just the fact that he's, I don't know, maybe his walks are down a little bit and his strikeouts are up. It just doesn't look as appealing, but I think Gunnar Henderson is still pretty attractive player. I think he's still trying to learn and understand shortstop. I'm not a big fan of how he's running through everything again, and that just kind of tells me that he's just not secure yet. He doesn't feel stable out there. So in that insecurity, he's got to either slide on his knees for plays or run through every ball. He doesn't trust the fact of setting up and making a fundamentally sound play. Well, whatever, he's making the plays right now, so that's all good. But I just think the poor guy, he's still so young, and there's just so much clutter in his head. And if he could find ways to compartmentalize some things, and you hear these guys talk about the process, but another thing he's got to do is kind of accept some responsibility as now the team leader. Yeah, we can put it on Polar Bear, but Gunnar, do you want to be the superstar guy? Then you better step up and kind of hold yourself accountable and be that guy for the team. Listen, I was screaming for Adley to be that guy, and it never quite happened. And I know Gunnar might feel a little off, but man, if this team they want him to be so good. They know how important he is. And in large part, that's why the Orioles offense has just been so inconsistent, just because he hasn't been that consistent offensive piece for a number of days now, that's for sure. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the right answer is. I still see great skill. I just think this game is so mental that if he can find a way to clean that part of it up, because he wears it on his sleeve, good or bad. Yeah, do we want to see emotion? Of course we do. We know he cares, but I think sometimes that energy can just get taken away from, his game. And so when he can understand how to channel energy the right way, yeah, learn from your mistake or whatever, and be frustrated because you're a team guy, but be done with it and move on to the next task at hand, man, because he just wears it so much. You see, sometimes it carries over into defense and definitely into the next at bat.
Should he still be, whether it's leading off or third, should he still be at the top of the lineup, or at some point should he have been dropped down more towards the bottom of the lineup?
Oh, I don't know, man. That's a good question. I think the fact that they move guys around so much, why wouldn't they try him just to shake it up a little bit? But I will say this: there's a presence about Gunnar. I don't know that too many pitchers like facing him. I think, and the fact that he's, been a little bit more consistent here recently against left-handed pitching throws another wrench into it. But, you're dealing with power, you're dealing with speed. And if he could cut back on a little on the swing and miss, he would be an elite, I think, more dangerous offensive type player. So just where he is in the lineup disrupts it, and I think there were a lot of times that I think back when I was a player, Mark McGuire was like, he couldn't run, man. He had a plantar fasciitis kind of thing going. And I was like, all you need to do is just stand in the box. Who cares? It's just your presence that changes the whole lineup, And I think Gunnar kind of offers that. They might be able to pitch to him a little bit, but they know they got to go through Gunnar and how dangerous he potentially could be.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. Does it add more pressure to him, I guess, is the flip side, right? Like, does he feel more of a burden because of it?
Well, yeah, so here you go. When you're thinking about, this great game at the highest level, I think there's a lot of psychological battling that goes on. Can you imagine if Alvarez says, okay, Gunnar, we're putting you down an 8-hole, man. Just take some pressure off. Well, what do you think Gunnar's first thought will be? I know what mine would be. I'm a failure, man. I failed. Right. I didn't do it. Okay. And that's just part of the human nature. Trust me. I felt that more times than any player. How about being in the on-deck circle in a big situation and getting whistled back? Hey, we're going to pinch hit for you. We don't trust you in this situation. What? Well, where's your confidence go? And a lot of Orioles hitters have had to deal with that. Like one night they're starting, and the next night they're getting pinch hit for. So there's some head scratching things going on there. But, I think that's the kind of how fragile some of these players can be mentally. So trying to keep their confidence up and staying positive is a tough battle. But you also have to be real about stuff, And so I hear what you're saying, Glenn. And it might be too late for that anyway.
I understand that.
To move them down, that's for sure.
A lot of look, right as soon as we were ready to write off Leody Taveras, he ends up having a really good week last week, right? But I think there's been a lot of questions about why not one more look at Heston Kjerstad, and I don't say that because I'm confident that Heston Kjerstad is ever going to be a quality major league hitter or a plus defender, but I do know that they're going to run out of time, that like next year they're going to have to make an actual decision about Heston Kjerstad, and I would think you'd want to have maybe one more prolonged look at him at the bigs before you've got to make a decision, or hoping that you can maybe get some trade value back in him. It's tough for me because again, I know we've seen him a lot, but I just feel like right now, with respect to, I like that Christian Franklin isn't redundant. I feel like you need to see him one more time. Am I wrong about that?
Well, that's interesting because I feel like they do need to evaluate their players, and whether you got to evaluate them somewhere, and why not in front of the major league coaching staff? I feel like they're all going to be here again, and if they're going to be the ones pulling the triggers and helping understand what is going to be the winning formula, for next year, and maybe what guys need to work on, I think that's where you have to do it, man, because I think over the past few years anyway, the evaluation process to some degree has just been missed, and or at least maybe they did understand that, but they didn't know that the ebbs and flows were going to be so steep, and the inconsistencies to lead to, this kind of outcome. So if you can put as many young guys in front of the coaching staff and let them run and play and see what they can do, without kind of selling out and saying we're not going to make it, I think it's important, and I think it's imperative, really, to get as many of the young guys up. Colton Cowser should be playing every day. Mayo should be playing every day. Decisions like that, really, because we can't go through another year with Colton Cowser being a utility center fielder.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We got to find out what we got right there. And the same thing holds true with what you said about Erstad. Is he going to be part of this organization, or do we have to get rid of him now? Because, and I know you're hanging on to some of Elias's guys here, but listen, if you're going to give guys opportunities, now's the time to do it, because there's going to be a day where you're just not going to have the patience for that.
No,
and I think we're at the end of it.
And he's out of options. So, I mean, like, it's just, you're going to have to make that decision. It's going to have to happen. Right. And if you only use spring training, and again, who knows how long spring training is going to be to make that decision, that is tough.
Well, everybody shines in spring training.
That is true, too. That is also true. You are not wrong about that. All right, Mike, what all do we want to get plugs in for?
Well, I know you already talked about the Be More Baseball podcast, like when we had Buster Olney on there, and him talking about his feelings about the Orioles. So that was pretty exciting. League of Dreams, we're just putting out our next episode, the Rocks the Pearls podcast. Frank Caleric and I did a tour of the Baltimore, or the Blind Institute of Baltimore, where they have a factory, they make paper products and things like that. It was pretty amazing. Anyway, we were part of the podcast, and so that'll be our next episode. Check it out, leagueofdreams.org, that Rocks the Pearls podcast.
Awesome. At M. Bordick, as well as how you follow him. Mike, always appreciate you, brother. Let's talk again real soon. Thanks for hopping on.
Sounds good, Glenn. Thanks.
It's Mike Bordick with us here on GCR.